Because that means that's.
Well, yeah, everyone thinks it's going to be the panacea. I mean, if the legislation gets approved, and if the legislation doesn't, then
When he talked to somebody about it.
yeah.
Okay, folks, we're going to go ahead and start. I know there's some probably still downstairs that has not come up yet. They asked me this morning to remind everybody that we're on a very tight schedule. You have 15 minutes to get from this one to the next one. It's a little bit different than yesterday. There's not that big long break built in between these two morning sessions. So I've obligated to take care of that part so we're ready to go. If you're in the right station here this morning, you're in here looking at the cow station that we're working with and heifer development. We have with us Dr. Phil Osborne, and he came to West Virginia in 1981 following graduating at Clemson University. He was our former extension livestock specialist at WVU for 33 years. So a lot of you in the cattle industry, if you're from this area, have met Phil and know what Phil's done. But during this time, he developed a feeder calf marketing program that included tele-auctions, feeder calf graded sales, yearling board sales, and what we see a lot of now, our quality assurance feeder calf program. This was all done under his tenure here. He served on the West Virginia Quality Assurance and Mid-Atlantic Quality Assurance Program developing training and certification that did receive national recognition at the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. And when he moved to this area and got married, he moved on to a farm down in the Clarksburg area called Lumberport. They got 380 acres there of forage and woodlands that they operate, that you're going to learn about today. This operation is focused primarily on forage production and has always followed the philosophy, if you maintain a good forage program, you will always have good cattle regardless of the breed. Along with that, he has done a heifer development program that's provided a value to the small cow-calf operator in this part of West Virginia. And some of the annual customers, since he has started, are still with him. The relationship he has developed there has been very valued, and he'll discuss about it. Dr. Osborne.
Okay, we're going, Ed Rayburn asked me to speak today on this program. Is it on? No. It's not on? Is it on?
No problem.
Try that.
I don't hear you.
I don't see it on that.
No, just put your phone on the
Ed asked me to talk a little bit about heifer development program, and asked me to talk from the standpoint of what I've been doing over the years with our program at home. I've tried to not put on my extension hat too much about the education part of it, because I can PowerPoint you to death with those kind of programs, but I just want to kind of maybe discuss some of the programs and the things that we've done on the farm. I met my wife here in West Virginia when I came, married her in 1986, and she had a farm down there, and shortly there, right after that, her father was killed in a farm accident, and her mother asked me to take over kind of running the farm down there. So basically we've been operating the farm ever since, and doing a few things there. But it's always been a part-time thing for me because of my role in extension and the things I had to do. But we wanted to keep the farm cleaned up and improve the farm, and so that's where we've been with our program. And what we developed there was a heifer development program. I think, well, first year I ran stocker cattle on the farm, and after that I decided I wanted to go in the heifer development program to sort of utilize my educational experience in reproductive area, and so this is where we went here. The farm is a grassland farm. It was formerly a dairy. Her grandfather and her dad milked cows there for years. It wasn't a big dairy, but it was basically a grass type program. It is a strip job. So everything there, at one time the coal was taken off of it there, and so you've got to deal with all the rigors that you have with poor soil and high banks and things like that to deal with, and water all displaced. But it is a grass farm, and we try to, we maintain it that way. There was some forage equipment there when I moved on, and I told her mother to sell that before I was ever tempted to use it. Didn't want anything to do with having to grow grains and silage or anything like that. But in our program, and our goal of the program in this area here, in heifer development, your goal is to get a good replacement animal on your operation. And what we've tried to do is develop a heifer here that's in our region here on a very strong forage-based type program that will go on and work and try not to make our program too different than what these cattle will be adjusted to on your farm. If you're looking at heifer replacement program, we're going to be part of this ruminant revolution that we heard about this morning. This is where it kind of all begins. But what you have, you get all excited on the heifers here because it's an opportunity to improve your genetics when you keep the right heifers. You can align a lot of your herd management here with the type of heifer you keep, the time of year that you're going to have her come into your program. Hopefully she's going to improve income for you because you'll get a better product each year you go along. And you try to select heifers that are going to improve your longevity so that they will stay in your program for 10 years or so. But the worst thing about heifers in a small operation like we have in many of our operations here and many of my customers is they're extremely inconvenient. Everybody has about 35 or 40 cows, and if you're trying to keep heifers and you want to have a 10% replacement rate, that's what? 3 to 4 heifers. What do you do to 3 or 4 heifers when you're trying to run your 30 cows? You got to find a place to keep them separate all the time. You've got to have a heifer cavities bull, which is kind of a waste to put on a cow herd because you don't need to pure cavities bull there. You need to get some growth and extra performance out of those cattle. So, and heifers become just a terrible inconvenience for a guy that's in a small operation. So one of the goals of our program was to bring these heifers in, develop them for people, or have a source of heifers that and many of my customers have used me as a source of heifers that they will buy versus keep it. And the ones that have good maternal genetics, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, I develop a lot of heifers for people and they go right back to where they came from. Our program here is, like I mentioned before, I want to develop a heifer that's adapted to our West Virginia environment. And I don't believe in bringing cattle out of the north here or out of the far west into this area. They just don't adapt. They don't adapt to our forage programs. And if we go back to that longevity thing, the cattle that come out of this area here last the longest in our herds. Heifers, the number one thing in all my customers, there's 2 things, the next 2 points there that I want to have in there. Nobody's ever fussed about the quality of the calf they get out of a heifer. They always fuss if they have any trouble with it. So the thing that you want is a live calf on the ground. And most of the time, the heifers will do a good job taking care of them. I don't worry about the quality of heifers as far as taking care of them. But everybody wants that calf to come unassisted and be alive. Second, that sells a lot of heifers for me is docility. And I make a really big point of that in the program I have because I want these heifers to be extremely quiet. And most of the time, those heifers, because they're so used to being around people and a lot of people, because before I had my kids out there, I had the dogs out there, my wife walks through them, and they're just almost too quiet sometimes. But if you have to go out there to assist her to do anything or make sure that calf nursed, she's not going to get up and run away from you when you go out there. And that's one of the key things. And a lot of people like that docility. And then I have long-term customer relationships. If you do business with me, I hope we do business for a long time afterwards. And many of the people that I've been doing business with, I've had with me for 27 years. They've been getting heifers every single time, and we've developed a relationship that I get my heifers from them, and they get their heifers back from me. And but long-term customer relationships is what really builds a program like this. We got lots of tools, and yesterday you heard Teddy talk that he doesn't want to use some of the tools that we have available. I like to use the tools. Because that's the education coming back from me. We have EPDs, I use EPDs, but you got to use them right in our program. But you've got a lot of tools out there that you can use. You can use performance data, but you've got to understand if you use them wrong, you can get in trouble. And he's absolutely right. If you select for a lot of growth and a lot of yearling weight, what's going to happen? Your cows are going to get big. And the bulls that I try to select for people to use, my philosophy in the siren to dam data, I go back to that EPD data. Primarily what I'm looking for is 100% Cavanese bull. I can cheat a little bit if I wanted to. If they were my cattle, I might cheat and use a bull with a little bit higher birth weight or right on the borderline. But when I'm selling them to somebody else and they're working in town somewhere and the cows are on the farm, maybe 20 miles away, they don't need any kind of risk. So I try to find 100% Cavanese bulls for the customers where they can get them coming in. But you also have all these other factors in there that you have to build into your program, into your management system, such as body condition scores. We'll talk about that. You've got to understand that these guys are in the feeder calf business. You've got to have a calf that's going to be very merchandisable for them, or if she stays in the herd, that she's going to raise those kind of calves for them. I practice low stress handling just to maintain that docility in the cattle. I think fetal programming, if you've never paid any attention to that, I think there's a real key to that. I use a lot of synchronization tools that I try to keep that very simple. Then you've got all the other things, colostrum, reproductive tract scoring, pelvic measurements and things, which I don't do some of those things. There are tools out there available to you, but just say for pelvic areas, you see a lot of people talk about pelvic areas in heifer development programs. Because I breed all these heifers AI one time, if I've got an abnormal type pelvic, she just goes out. I find her at that time. But when I was in graduate school, I had to work with a co-worker of mine, and we measured about 5,000 heifers in every prison farm in South Carolina and North Carolina for 5 years in a row. And we found out that big pelvics just come in big cows. So we didn't, we never got a lot of information out of measuring pelvics. But a lot of people still talk about measuring pelvic areas and things like that. But that's not one of those things. I think you can look at the cattle and find out a lot of times that she's wrong. But every time that I'm in there palpating to read her AI or something, you can find an abnormal pelvic. And to be honest with you, I think I've only eliminated maybe 2 or 3 heifers on pelvic shape or size in the 26 years that I've been breeding those heifers. But it may be, if you're buying a nondescript set of heifers and they're coming from a lot of different places, it may be a tool that you have to use. But I kind of know where all my heifers are coming from. And they don't change a whole lot in their type of conditions. Ultrasound data, I use ultrasound data a lot in the beginning. I'll show you a little bit of data on that. That's another tool that I don't use a lot now. I used to use it quite a bit. But now I basically reserve it for the guys that I'm developing purebred heifers for. They want the data back. I try to keep their heifers in a contemporary group so that their data is valuable to them. And I submit it back to them, but they have the opportunity to get ultrasound data if you want it. And I have the technician there every single year collecting data. But I've cut back doing it on a lot of the commercial heifers because of the lack of the value of it. It does have value whenever a person wants to evaluate, say, a new bull. And he sends me 5 or 6 heifers out of a new bull, and he wants to get some data back on that bull. Then he's got a valuable data set to work with. But if you send me heifers from 3 or 4 bulls, and you only got 1 or 2 of each one of them, you're not going to get a lot of useful data for $15 or $20 a head it's going to cost. Source of heifers. When I first started, this is extremely important, I think, is where do you get your heifers from? And I first tried to buy heifers out of graded sales. I always thought if you bought a PNAM1 heifers, that ought to be a good place to get a bunch of good heifers. You lose more than 50% of them because they don't make good cows. They make good heifers to put in a feed yard, but you don't find good cow material in a graded feeder cabinet. You need to kind of know the source of your heifers, and I had to abandon that program real quick. Of course, you can raise heifers. I don't have a cow herd, didn't have time to have a cow herd. So I didn't have a chance to raise very many heifers from any other places. But what I did try to do is I tried to work with some of our larger producers in the state. And I was working of course, with our quality assurance feeder calf program and many of the producers in that Morgantown area. I had opportunity to get the heifers out of those programs that I knew a lot about. And I'd buy the heifer calves from those guys and put them into the program. And they tended to be our my better heifers every time, and I stayed with that program over the years. You can get heifers into sales. I bought heifers at the expo and things like that, put them in, but I still don't have the success that I get when I get them off of a known location or off a known producer group of heifers. I used to buy a few heifers from the boys over in the South Branch Valley that would winter them because I didn't have an opportunity to winter many of these heifers. And for years, I used to have somebody else winter them for me, and I'd bring them back to the farm in the spring. And but what would happen there is we'd get some of the heifers over conditioned. They would be good heifers, but I never got the longevity out of them. They didn't stay in the herds long enough. So you kind of lose the description of where they come from, or you can get them from other programs. But your source of your heifers is going to be key. One of the ways that I've gotten heifers, and one part of the program in which I have, and I've had some in our long-term relationships, is I bought some of the first heifers I had, and then the producers I got them from, they would come back and buy their heifers back. And the program that I always set up for several years is they trade me 2 heifer calves for 1 bred heifer. They get to pick their own heifers. If I got 15 heifers from, I get 15 to 20 heifers from one producer in Pennsylvania forever, it seems like. And every year he takes 15 back, he brings me 20. And then he pays me the difference on those. Other people and around that I would trade 2 heifer calves for 1 bred heifer. It'd be the heifer they're picking because it was their own heifers. I said, you get to pick your own heifers however you want them. And some of the guys, they pulled over the performance data, I'd give them back. Over the ultrasound data, they picked the heifers they wanted back home. They always had it, and then I'd sell them whatever they left out of their own heifers. And that, I always had good heifers in that program, and they always got back the genetics they wanted, and they got back, if they were buying good performance bulls like they wanted to put into their program, they knew what they were going to bring back into their program. So that's how I generated a lot of my replacement heifers came back in 2-to-1 trades. Didn't have to work that way, and some of them a lot of them I do just sell straight out of the ones that came back in. In our heifer selection, and this is your extension thing you heard yesterday, and one of the things I do when I go back and I look to get a set of heifers off a farm somewhere, or I'm trading heifers, one of the things I ask for is I want the heifers born in the first 21 days, if I can. Now, a lot of guys have a 45-day calving season, and I don't feel too bad about getting any heifers in a 45, but I don't stretch them any further than that. You get your most fertile heifers in that section, and if you look at Rick Funstein's data out of Nebraska, those heifers born in the first 21 days, there's a 70% chance they'll be there in 5 years. And that's the real key to that, is to try to keep those very first. Develop the heifers in an environment they're raised in. In my place, they're going to get to eat fescue and lots of fescue because of the strip job is there. But I do dilute it down to a lot of, I have a lot of managed for legume, but the fescue's there. And that's a lifesaver for me because I don't feed much hay until the month of January. That's the first hay any of these heifers usually get is in January. And they're going to be out on grass by the second week of April most of the time every year. And that the fescue allows me to do that into my program. But I manage it. You can't go changing all your forages, as some people mentioned. Try to avoid the extremes when you have heifers. One thing that I have found over the years, and you just mark this down in your book, those big, fast-growing heifers, I don't care if she's the first one born, the big, fast-growing heifers that you have will not make your best cows. They'll be your fast-growing heifers, but for some reason, I think what happens, don't ask me why they do what they do, but sometimes I think they got a little bit more testosterone or something in their system, or too much estrogen is the reason they grew so fast, but they tend not to be the very best. It's usually, say if you called out the very extremes, the very fast, the big growthy heifers, put them in the feeder cell, they're going to make you more money, because you're not going to be able to keep them around. And what kind of led me into this is I talked to a lot of sheep guys when I was over the years, and they always said, call the top 10% of your sheep, the fast-growing sheep. He said, the best replacement ewes will be in the next 10% group. And it's almost the same way in cattle. If you get rid of those extremes, you want to get rid of the ones that, of course, we're not going to keep the ones off the bottom 21% or the low growing ones, but those big, fast, growthy heifers a lot of times are not very fertile. And they'll come back open on me, or they don't bring back for you the next time. So you want to avoid extremes. Then we call, of course, on temperament, try to keep everything ID'd in there so where we don't have any problems in bloodlines and things like that. One thing in our program, and it is true, crossbred heifers do the best. I have the best AI conception rates out of the crossbred heifers. And they make better cows for you. And most of my customers are commercial, so that's where they work. Don't keep any heifers that needed any assistance. I asked the guys, don't send me anything that you had any problems with. Of course, don't send me any free martins. I don't need to try that. Even though I've ended up with a few of them, and the guy said, oh, I forgot that thing was born as a twin. I have a preference to older cows. Same thing in buying bulls. When I go to buy a bull on the test station or something, I've always bought performance bulls, but the first thing I do is I go through that catalog and find all the ones that have had at least 6 calves somewhere. Try to find the ones, or if you got a 10-year-old cow, and that was mentioned the other day, that you hardly make mistakes if you find a bull that came out of a well-proven cow with a good data set behind it. And they'll work particularly in a heifer program. We talked about eliminating the outliers. Reference sires and dams, if you can get that, I collect all that data from the producers as much as I can so people know where they are, or if they certain bloodlines they like to maintain in their program. We talked about reproductive tract scoring. If you are pelvic measurements and things like that. I don't do too much of that because I figure if they don't respond to my treatments, they're only going to have 45 days to get bred, and I turn them into feeder heifers pretty quick, so I don't spend all the time trying to palpate 700-pound heifers to get a tract score. And then because I'm going to be back in her a little bit in 2 weeks or 3 weeks later anyway. You have to budget, build a budget in this thing, and we'll kind of go about this. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but go back into your program and look at all your expenses. And we'll look at a flow sheet in a minute, but I have to deal with every one of these expenses right here. If I have renting pasture or feed, I have to buy any extra feed, or veterinary care or breeding fees. I don't pay breeding fees, but I got breeding supplies that makes up a major cost line for me, or if I have to hire any type of help, which doesn't happen too much, it's mostly on trade, but you have to deal with all these. And here's how, just look and see where these costs come from. We're not talking about this thing from anywhere else, but if you go look in here and you can see where all the costs lie, and of course, a lot of the costs are right there. And this was in 2015, the cost of developing a heifer was $1,400 and some dollars. Of course, today it's not going to cost $1,400 and some dollars because we don't have $2.54 hundredweight heifers. But this changes all the time, and that's why the 2-for-1 trade always worked for me, because the fluctuation of feeder calf prices fluctuated with the value of the bred heifer. And that's how we always worked that deal out. That year, I'm glad to say, you can see for the value of that heifer, by the time you got that heifer bred in there, adjusted for conception rates and everything else, you had $2,200 in those heifers in 2015. I was able to sell heifers that year, probably be the highest heifers I ever sell in my life, but I sold a lot of heifers for $2,500 and $2,600. Just commercial heifers running through the program. But over the years I sold a lot of $900 heifers too, so it changes, and it's going to change this year. I expect prices on bred heifers this year to be about $200 cheaper than they were last year, unless this market changes. Here's what budget expenses are that I'm looking at probably this year on heifers. This is just to give you an idea of somewhere where you go in there. But of course, you see the number one cost you've got there is feed costs. This year it's going to be about, this is for year round, you own these heifers for 365 days basically. You've got about $448 worth of feed cost in them. count everything. Veterinary supplies, about $51. Marketing and shipping is about $15 a head, because you gotta bring them in, you gotta take them out. Breeding fees, you have value the bulls at about $125 a head, and that's counting my AI in there also, with the bulls and with my AI costs. You've got a few indirect costs, you rank about $70, pay about $600 for those calves coming in this fall, and the cost of any of the open ones cost me about $50 a head against the whole group. That's usually if you only have about 10% open. I always figure that I'll have about 10% open by the set of heifers. And it usually costs me about 50. So my total investment in this set of heifers that's probably on the ground right now is going to be about $1,359 for this next fall. And that's going to make it real tight. I can tell you that right now. It's going to be tight trying to make money on the red heifers. Challenge for you is heifer. You've got to keep extra heifers if you want the right number to go back into your program. That's why a heifer development program may work for you. You may want to send your heifers to another heifer development program where you have an extra one that it's just like all the extras I have that don't breed. I eat all the ones that don't breed, even if I'm trading back in from people. I own those heifers. So I got to do something with them. But it's easier for me to pick up 15 heifers and put them on a board sale and get rid of them because I find out right away they've got value. But if you keep them, a lot of times you don't find out till way late. The board sales are over. You only got 2 or 3 head, and you got to find a way to recoup that cost. But in a program like mine, I have a little bit of better opportunity to recoup the cost on the ones that don't get bred. Challenge in here is not to over-condition these heifers. In a feeding program, this is why I use a high forage-based system. There's a lot of heifer development programs that will put them on dry lot, feed lot all winter. In fact, I've made that mistake a few times over the years, and I'll tell you right now, you develop a heifer and you put her in a feed yard and feed her corn silage and bring her back home and turn her out on hay, you've got a disaster. It just doesn't work for you very well. And you want to keep from over-conditioning these heifers because a heifer is really bad about getting too fat too quick. And the first thing she does is she puts fat in the mammary system, and then you start losing milk production. And it doesn't take very much. She can do that off of your really good milking cows can cause that problem. If you got a heavy milking cow and that heifer gets fat, even when she's coming off the cow at weaning time. You've got to put that pressure on for early conception. And in our program, I will synchronize all the heifers one time using the synchronization program. They get bred one time AI. The bulls comes out of there religiously the 4th of July. Basically, I don't start until the 23rd. I breed on the 23rd of May. That means some of the calves that come the last week of February do the 1st of March. I used to calve them earlier in February, and the customers, it just seemed like every single time I had a group of heifers that you synchronized, you went to the trouble to breed them all AI. You had them going to calve about the middle of February, and it comes up to be 18 below zero when they were all due. What do you lose? You lose the heifer you had the most money in. You lose a heifer that had an AI calf, and they were better off getting the calf born a little bit later, so I moved that back quite a bit. The customers quit. They didn't fuss about having a little bit later calf or 1st of March calf because they got a live calf. And they didn't like having to go out there and fight with them a low zero either. In the nutritional development, in this type of thing, you don't want to apply too much artificial nutrition. I try to feed very little grain as far as corn or anything like that. In fact, I don't feed any corn, but I do use a dry distiller's grain as a protein supplement, and I mix soy hulls with that. I have a mixture there that makes me about a 20% supplement for the cattle. They eat the hay that I make on the farm or the hay that I purchase, and I'll show you a little bit of that, but they only get about 3 pounds of that dry distiller's mix per head per day. I used to, in the early years, I used to feed about 7 pounds of some kind of a mix, mostly soy hulls or dry distillers or something, some type of feed, but I was feeding as much as 7 to 8 pounds per head per day. And and I found out that you didn't need to push those heifers quite that hard. If you got them up to 700 or 800 pounds, then, you know, it didn't change the conception rate, and it didn't change your product at the very end, and overall conception rate and the value of the heifer. And you made too many mistakes when you tried to feed into them, because you started masking how good your heifers really were. What you want to do is challenge that heifer, put her on a basically lower plane of type of nutrition so that she fits your program. And if I feed her real good, the chances are that's the most feed she's ever going to see the rest of her life. So she's going to go to a farm and just feeds them straight hay. So you don't need to put a lot of artificial. I would get away from feeding any type of supplement at all today, because I've got a lot of friends of mine that I work with in other heifer development programs. They feed 100% wrapped hay. Their conception rates are as good as mine. The heifers are actually a little bit smaller than mine, but they feed 100% good wrapped hay, and that's all they feed their heifers, no supplements at all. The difference in their heifers and my heifers, and the reason I feed supplement, is docility. When they drop that big brown bale on the ground, they're not down on the ground. There's not a heifer, when I go out there and feed them every day, even though that little bit of supplement I give them, I'm walking through them every single day. And that's what makes them quiet. And I'm convinced that part of it is where I probably save the most money or get as much back out of it as I do the supplement. My supplement is primarily just to help digest the hay I have. Target weights, we're talking about target weights. I look for heifers. I try to build my heifer program to where they gain about 1.5 pounds a day, or 1.25. I'm happy with that per day through the winter. I have 180 days in there, so I usually put on, every year I put on about 200, 225 pounds per heifer. I weighed heifers the other day. I'm right on course for that. Day before yesterday, I weighed a set of heifers to see where I am. I always like to weigh to see if I'm going to hit the target weights for May breeding. And the heifers are clicking right along at 1.5 pounds a day, which is a little bit better at this time of year, and that's because we had a milder winter. But they're moving, they're coming along, they're right on. Biological types, over the years, I've been as guilty as anybody about making big cattle. I try, and because I have a little bit of control over this program, and I have a little bit of control over the sources of my heifers here, we are all working to have a very moderate type cow, working down there for 1,100 pound cow if we can. We don't always do that because it seems like every time I think I'm going to make one of those, she gets bigger and I lost it between the two. And, but the tendencies of just right what you heard from Katie Gentry and all these guys, keep your cow size down. It does make a difference. It's just like somebody was fussing the other day about somewhere. He says, grass doesn't grow as good as it used to. He says, I can't hold the same number of cows on this farm my dad did. Well, the difference was in the kind of cows you had. Everybody else had those little Hereford Angus cross cows, and I can remember when I first came down here, we had down Jackson's Mill. We jammed that barn with 2,000 Hereford Angus cross cows. Then we switched over to exotics, and they were jumping out of the pens. They were all big, and we couldn't even hardly put 1,000 of them in there. It's just a difference in the kind of cattle that we've had. But we ought to work back toward a biological type that works on your farm that you don't have to supplement with. That's the major thing.
Bill, what is your target weight at breeding time?
At breeding time, I like to be somewhere around 750 pounds, 785 pounds. Now, I do have heifers, of course, that's the average. I've got heifers that are going to be bigger than that. And in truthful, they need to be bigger than that because they're going to be bigger type cows. Because in the range of heifers I've got, you're going to have different body type. And it depends on where I get heifers from. I was looking at that data yesterday. I've got one set of heifers I got from a guy, and they weighed about 600 pounds when I got them. They gained already so far, they're on a gain right now, they've in 100, and let's see, that's what I was measuring on there was 120 days, they'd already put on 200 and some pounds. But they needed to do that. I got another set of heifers, a little bit smaller type frame heifers and stuff, and they were gaining about 1.4 pounds a day, put on about 150, 160 pounds, but they're still going to reach puberty at the same time. So your different body types are in there. But my target weight is to be about 775 pounds so that I can have a higher success in AI. If I wasn't AI, I probably wouldn't have to push that hard. But if you're going to go to the expense of AI, you need to have cycling heifers. Sample your hay in all these programs, whether you have your own heifer development program, but you can see you get a lot of variation in hay. And this is just 3 samples I had off the farm, and you can see I'm not feeding the real high quality hay. Is the TDN value right here on my hay is less than 60 most all the time, and that's why I use a supplement to bring it so that I can get the digestibility I want out of it. Crude protein can vary quite a bit. This is cow hay right here. You can get away with that when I'm out there grazing, and I got extended grazing period of time, and I got a little bit of extra grass. Those cattle do all right. They do fine on this 11% hay. If I made a lot of 11, 12% hay, I could cut the supplement out. But in the program that I have, I usually have to get just a little bit of supplement. And it'll work just kind of like this. And you can see it on the dry distiller's grain, because of the hay, TDN value of the hay there, is I've got to come up a little bit, and it just takes about 2 pounds of dry distiller's grain to do that. And that's about what I'm feeding, because I'm mixing that dry distiller's grain with a soybean hull flake. And that's just to make it so it flows through my bin where I can work to it. Ideally, in your farm situation, you might not even need to feed any supplements at all if you're developing heifers. And it would be better if you didn't, other than the fact that you get to walk in them quite often. But you can do that without having to feed them also. But table requirements down here, if you look at requirements, this is what will happen. If you feed this amount of feed, I'm feeding about 13 pounds of hay a day, 2 pounds of supplement, 2 to 3 pounds of supplement. Mine's more like 3 pounds of supplement. And on a 600 to 700 pound heifer on that type of ration, she'll do 1.5 pounds a day. As she gets to 700 to 800 pounds, that's going to drop to about a pound a day. And that's basically where you need to be, because when I take these heifers and I put them back out on the grass, I'm going to try to flush those heifers. They're going to be on grass 30 days before I start breeding. And I got a lot of guys that don't like to turn heifers out in the heifer development program. They leave them in dry lot because they want to breed them AI or something in dry lot. But it just makes a world of difference to drop those cattle out on forages in the spring for about 30 days prior to breeding. But one thing you do have to watch there is they're not gaining a lot of weight. This is one thing that shocked me. The cattle change a lot in their looks and their condition, but they're also changing their rumen profile to go from a dry feed to a forage. And they don't gain very much weight in their first 30 days. In fact, you're doing everything you can to hold them to the weight that you had going out. I used to think they would gain a lot of weight, but they really don't when you go out and lush forages in the first 30 days. It takes them almost that much time to get adapted to digest in the wet forage. Health programs, we didn't talk about health programs because I guess I'll get into the assumptions of health programs, but I'm a firm believer in our quality assurance health program. If you need that program, you can get it from off the website, you can get it from our county agents, any one of them know it. But I go with a full health program, and this is just our weaning type program here. And every heifer that comes to the farm that I get is weaned, and she's vaccinated this way prior to me getting it. So every heifer has the same type of health program. And they get it pre-weaning vaccination program, and they get a booster program here. And I'm in the process right now as I give all these heifers another IBR PI3 BVD shot. That's what I was doing the other day when I weighed them. I give them their booster. I like them to be over that booster shot when I get ready to breed them come in May. So I give them that much time to build the immunities or over that period and get over any type. Every time that you give a vaccine, you're going to make an animal go through a sweat process to where they get used to it. The more of it they've had, the lesser that process is. But you do set those animals back a little bit whenever you vaccinate them. So that's one reason I like to get it done way ahead of time, ahead of my breeding, so I have the protection ahead of time, and also not to have the ill effects of that when you go to breed AI. So try to get in, even in your own programs, if you're keeping replacement heifers and you're going to booster in the spring, try to get it way ahead of breeding so you don't have any ill effects. And maybe a temperature rise or anything like that when you're giving a vaccine. All your development costs does not stop at breeding time. And you have to really pay attention. This is where the fetal programming comes in. If you look at fetal programming, they're showing that that heifer that you take care of right after you get her bred, you're setting her up for her next calf. So you want to keep her on a high plane of nutrition. This is where it gets difficult for small producers with 3 or 4 heifers. They do not have opportunity to separate her off and give her that little bit of extra care. You can't just dump her in the cow herd and expect her to do well. And the fetal programming is part of that. That's where that higher plane of nutrition passes on to that calf for developing immunities later on. Pay a lot of attention to your post-breeding gains, because if you don't pay attention to that, you're going to have some conception losses. And I don't understand all the concepts that go into there, but one of the fallacies that we've had, and I've used it a lot of times, is I will blood test for pregnancies on some of these AI cattle so I know which ones are AI, but you better go back and pregnancy check again, because you're going to lose some pregnancies. There used to be an old saying when in the dairy business when I was in school, look at 30 days, 60 days, 90 days post-breeding to find out what conception rates were in dairy cows, and they always reported that data in the AI studs. They don't do it, I don't think they do it now like they used to, but you would always lose some cattle along the way. And there were some bulls that were better, that were different on those conception rate differences. But you will lose a certain percentage of them if you try to check them too early and assume that they stay bred. And a lot of it has to do with nutrition. And like I said, if it forages, they got to get adapted to the forages. Where you're right there breeding at the time that your forages are really washy, and they have to, and they're in an adaptation stage right there also. So you've got to be careful. Develop marketing programs for your yearling heifers. You're not going to get them all bred. So you've got to know what you're going to do with them. I sell a few freezer beeves, or if I've got too many of them, I'll put them on with some other guys that are in heifer development like I am, and we'll put a load of them together and put them on the board cells. This is just that data, a little bit showing that the time of calving affects heifer progeny, and those born in the first 21 days and those born in the second 21 days. And you look at the cycling percentages, and this is probably the most important thing, but you see the cycling percentages of those born in the first 21 days is 70% versus 58%. That's the data that makes you want to go back and try to keep those first-born heifers. 90% pregnancy rate versus 86%. That doesn't seem like a whole lot right there, but it does make a big difference. And just a little bit of data there to show you where the difference is coming up, and that was collected at the University of Nebraska. Look at the cost to raise heifers based on alternative summer pasture costs, and you can see where your feed cost really affects what your price of your heifers is going to be. And it works on your animal unit and summer costs. There is a cost to grass, and you need to be well aware of what it's costing. Put your own numbers in a system like this. So we'll just kind of summarize here a little bit in this program is you can use a heifer development program like the one I have, or other programs. There are other programs being set up where somebody else can raise your heifers. I think it's very valuable for small cow-calf producers. Many of the small producers I work with like the idea of not having to keep their own heifers. They tell me they can run that cow one more year, get one more calf, and when they sell that cow and calf, they pay for their new heifer coming in by keeping the numbers. By just not having to keep those extra 3 or 4 heifers on the farm, they're able to hold those cows a little bit longer and let those older cows pay for those heifers coming in the program. If you've got a lot of heifers, another thing is you can use terminal silers if you're in a crossbreeding program, and maybe you're using Charolais cross silers on your F1 black baldy type cows. You don't want to keep heifers out of those, but you've got an advantage. You've got a big calf that you can sell. You might want to go to a program to buy your heifers. And there are several heifer development programs around the country that you can utilize, but just they're all over the place. Just about every state has one. West Virginia had our Premium Plus Heifer program. There's about 4 or 5 breeders that participated in that program for several years. In Kansas, there's one called the Sunflower Supreme, and there's a Heartland Cattle Company out there. They've been in business for about 35, 40 years also. And they all have the same type of goals, but they fit in their environments that they're out of. Virginia has a program. Missouri started a program, kind of kicked all this off with the Show Me Heifer project, where the producers were developing heifers in a single location. The Southern Bull Test has always been a source of a few heifers down there that you could buy. They were open, and many times I always saw people go down there and spend as much for an open heifer as you could buy the bred heifer for in the fall. Never could understand that a lot of times, but they would do it every single year. They go down there and pay a fortune for those heifers. The thing I didn't like about those heifers, and some of the producers got a few problems is, and I think they're well aware of it now and really working on it, they get those heifers over-conditioned. They were fat coming out of there, weighing 900, 1,000 pounds before they ever started breeding. And that's kind of detrimental to the long run. So I'm going to kind of stop right there, and if any of you have any other questions, I'll try to answer your questions. And I hope I didn't skip over anything major, because sometimes I assume everybody knows something.
Mineral, what's something on mineral? You wouldn't think special on that, or?
I don't try, as far as what's available to all of you, I like that Southern States breeder mineral. That is a really good mineral. And if that's available to you, that's a good mineral. In the last few years, Modern County has a mineral program where Ed Rayburn has formulated a mineral for our program. I've been using those minerals every year right now. But as far as what I used to use all the time was that Southern States breeder mineral. I had excellent results with it. The thing I liked about that mineral also is it had high levels of zinc, and that was important in that program, especially for feet and leg problems. Another thing that you want to, I didn't mention in here, but one thing that you want in here is pay attention, particularly now, because I see it a lot, is your feet on your calf. I didn't mention that earlier, but when you go to these heifers, it's hard to see it in heifers when I first
Hit escape.
because you don't want to see it.
Hit
if you
continue
don't have
recording.
it. But I really see it before I get rid of them. And last year, I think I got rid of 5 heifers that had bad feet. They had bad feet by the time they're a year old. You know, toes start to cross and things like that. So pay attention to the bulls that you're using. Don't buy a bull that has bad feet and expect to keep replacements on
Shit.
it, because it's just
Yeah,
not gonna
fans.
happen. But that's one thing, particularly in black cattle, that's a pet peeve with me is bad feet.
Dude, 1366, dude.
To answer Phil's question, if any of you are in this area, that mineral program is through my office, and we're getting ready to do our summer order. If you want on that list, you need to call my office this coming week, because the bids are out, prices will be back, and we'll get that load shipment in for the second week of April. We do it twice a year. We do it in the spring and fall. And
I'm gonna have to remember how to come in here and
the only thing it
come
costs
in
you
here
$6
for the
to
video.
join the Livestock
Because something
Association
will come up
in
again
Mon
and say,
County,
"Stop
because you
video."
have to be in that Livestock
We'll have to do it.
Association for us
Yeah.
to meet all the regulatory requirements.
Talking.
But if you are interested, see me or get online and get our phone number and contact us, and we'll add you to the list. We deliver to the WVU Animal Science Farm, and it's easy for everybody to get in the load and haul out.
Don't let this table deceive you too much right here, because I want to bring up on that cost. That right there, that table pays for all your expenses. If I had to sell a heifer for $1,359, I'm not losing money. I paid myself for my hay, I paid myself for my forage and everything else.
Hopefully I can sell one, you know, for $1,400 or $1,500. Depends on what the value of feeder calves are, but right now, that's kind of my projection of what the costs are gonna be. What will change that is how many opens I have. A lot of years I only have about, I usually keep 80 or 90 heifers a year. I might have 5 or 6 opens. For some dumb reason, last year I had 13 open heifers. That's the most I've ever had. And, but it's changed and you don't know exactly what goes on. I have a sneaky suspicion what happened last year is I had one bull get pink eye right in the middle of the breeding season. And if he gets pink eye, his body temperature goes up and his semen goes down. And that's what, that'll knock you in a loop. I use 3 bulls, not because I need 3 bulls, but I have 1 red Angus bull, 2 black bulls, and I have guys that want me to breed cows certain ways, and that's what I try to do. And I have a small cow herd using the red Angus, that I've been using red Angus bulls on. They're commercial cows, they're no purebreds by any means, but I do have red Angus bulls. I keep a lot of female side of those cows. But some people want me to breed some of their cattle back to red Angus bulls just because of the maternal characteristics that we've been able to get out of that breed. But this is basic cost here. One thing you got to keep in mind is that does pay for me to do business right there with my forage cost. And the opportunity cost and the feed cost and the grazing, I could run stock with cattle and do the same thing. Get the same payment. So that's all.
Phil, you make the AI bull selection?
99% of the time I do, but like I have, this year I have I probably have about 50 head of cattle now that I know are going back to people that I got Wayne Wagner, purebred cattle. He will tell me what bulls he wants from bred, or he'll supply the semen, and that's what I'll breed. And so I have some cattle like that. The owner will supply me with it if they want. If they don't catch, I try to make sure I put one of the best bulls I have that won't hurt them EPD wise and things like that. Put those cattle with that particular bull. I don't get real excited a lot of times about all the big EPD values because, like I said, if you're using bulls with 130 pound yearling weight, 32 pounds of milk, we're going to have a hard time keeping them around. I don't own a lot of those type of bulls. I don't mind having that growth factor there, but I also put it in a smaller type package than I can. You know, 4.5, 5 frame bull instead of a regular bull.
Cow side. Last time I heard Dr. Wagner speak, one of the things that he said would take them full off his list immediately if their yearly EPD was 100 or more.
Yeah, but what you say and what happens doesn't always work. I got these heifers and they're pretty big.
Yeah.
But, you know, you have to pay attention to what you have to be strict with that. That's one of the hardest things is to stay in there. And when he said the other day, if you're selecting from maternal, boy, you've got to be this. Because it's easy to open up that Angus Journal and ruin a breeding program. It will screw up more breeding programs than anything. To get breed magazines and then look through there and you see all these big growth bulls and these big prices. But what you want to do is be very disciplined if you want a maternal type cow. And what I try to do, I don't use a lot of new bulls. I try to use proven bulls. And I try to buy semen in big enough batches that I can keep my costs up. Because I use them commercial. A lot of times I go to select size and say I want 100 units of a bull, and I can knock almost $10 or $15 off the price as long as I know I don't have to register the cattle.
What EPDs do you select for? What are your major?
I guess I look across the board and they're saying you're not going to have the bull that does everything, and you're not. Everyone's going to have a hole in it somewhere. But I think in a maternal, one of the worst things, I'll tell you what not to do. Don't pay any attention to dollar beef if you're trying to select cows. That will screw you up in a hurry. That is a composite feedlot bag. It is not a maternal bag. And I got a friend of mine that's in the heifer business, and he paid a lot of attention to that for 5 or 6 years. I'll tell you where it hurt him to work. He's rebreeding those heifers. He has good conception rate the first time, but he has a very poor conception rate the second time. When you make those kind of selection tests. You want to select for growth. You can't beat without growth. So I'll look at growth EPDs. But if you look at yearling weight EPDs, you don't need to be over 100 in maternal cattle. In fact, some of them, there's in a real closed herd, those numbers are going to be low if you have an opportunity to buy bulls out of a really closed type herd. Because their EPD values are going to be down in the 70s and 80s. I've even seen some really darn good bulls in the 50s and 60s. It's just because they're not tested against other bulls. And you just got to kind of pay attention to those. Milk is important, but I try to keep milk in the low 20s on most of those bulls. And what I have found, if you keep in these cattle, I used to select, don't get me wrong, I used to think you had to have all the milk in the world, and I made that mistake. And you start putting 30 pounds of milk, 28 pounds of milk, 32 pounds of milk in an early spring program, you're going to have bad udders. If you calve in January, February, you can get away with that. But I saw it, and some guys that I worked with quite a bit, that moved their cows from January, February calving to March calving. They selected hard on milk over the year. And when they went to that calving, right when they had spring flush of grass, they blew up these big udders, and you got these little bitty calves that can't take all the milk, and then you have spoiled udders. What you'll get on a lower type milk animal is she'll have a moderate, she won't maybe raise the biggest calf before she, because that udder development is not fully there. The second year, she catches right back up and does what she's supposed to do on a lower type milk bull. I'm talking about an 18, 19 pound, 20 pound milk bull compared to a 32 pound milk bull. That heifer, that number works. That EPD does work. So you want to pay attention to how much milk you can have. If you look at how much forage you have on your farm, most people don't have enough forage to handle more than 20 pounds, 25 pounds. It's sort of, remember that chart that I showed you yesterday, if you were in the one program I was in? It showed that we've improved genetics quite a bit, but we've not increased weaning weight. It's because we've outrun our forage supply. We've got more genetics than we've got forage. The only place that we see our genetics is in the feedless, because we get unlimited feed. It's your environment.
Okay, folks, we're running out of time. Bill's around throughout the day. Please fill out the evaluations, lay them at the edge of the table. You've got 15 minutes to make it to your next session. Thank you.